Good afternoon, everyone. You are very welcome to today's show. And we are talking postnatal depression today. And it is something that affects so many women. And our guest today, Fiona Walsh, is going to share her own story about her journey through it. Fiona, you are very, very welcome. And thank you so much for sharing what is an extremely personal story, but one that I know will help so many others when they come through, if it hits them themselves or their families. So
yeah,
tell everybody a bit about yourself and how we ended up talking and our journey.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. Well, Barbara and I know each other because I'm a coach and an IT trainer, so I have my own business as well. That's how Barbara and I know each other. And I reached out looking for somebody that would have me on as a guest onto their show because I wanted to talk about my experience of postnatal depression leading up to World Mental Health Day, which is on Sunday the 11th. I spoke about it earlier in the year at an event I'd hosted in aid of Pieta House back in March for International Women's Day. And that was the first time I'd really spoken openly about my experience, even though that was nearly 10 years ago. So I think really being aware that it was the World Mental Health Day coming up, I wanted to share my story, but with an aim to help other people. That's the reason why I'm sharing my story.
And it is, and I mean, we spoke the other day, so I'm not even going to attempt to start your story. I'm going to let you start from wherever it is that you're comfortable with, because
okay.
It is extremely moving.
Okay, so I'm going to go back 10 years in June. And my father passed away after a very short battle with cancer. He was diagnosed and I think he died 4 or 5 weeks later. So I found that very challenging. I think, as you can tell, I'm not from Ireland, I'm from Birmingham. So it's very challenging when you've got somebody living in a different country, or even if you're in the same country and you're in different parts of Ireland. I think when you're not living closely to someone and you're not used to seeing them all the time, I think it's very difficult to start to grieve, because I remember coming back to Ireland and nothing really changed. I didn't used to, it was the same life going on, and I would ring home, and usually when my dad was here, obviously he would say, "Oh, you want to speak to your mother?" and he'd just pass me straight over. So nothing really changed. Yeah, dads do. So nothing really changed, and I probably hadn't really started to grieve. But shortly after he passed away, literally a couple of weeks after he passed away, I found out that I was pregnant. And it was a bit of a surprise because it wasn't something I was expecting, and I didn't think I was in a position to get pregnant at that time. And it was obviously quite bittersweet, because it would have been nice for him to have known that he was going to be a grandparent, because it would have been the first grandchild for the family. But, things, we get through things and we move on. I think at the time, a lot of people said things to me like, "Oh, isn't it amazing? One life ends and another life starts," and that was something that was really, really in my head. So the pregnancy progressed reasonably well. I chose to have some private tests done at about 12 weeks. Everything was good. It was a bit of a blur. As I said, I was sort of grieving anyway, and I had very, very bad morning sickness through the whole of the pregnancy. Unfortunately, my son was born at 21 weeks gestation in December. So it was a stillbirth, and then no baby. No baby at the end of that. So really my grief was probably compounded because I'd have been grieving for my father still, and for my baby as well.
Yeah, and it is. And as we were talking the other day, and just to give you, give you a few seconds, because it is a very emotional journey that you're going to take us on.
It is.
And yeah, and I can feel it here, even at, talking to you, because I know what's there, but you were carrying your father, the grief for your dad, even at the start of your pregnancy. And like a lot of women, what we do is, okay, I've done that, now I have to think about this, and you kind of park
very much so.
that first grief, and then all of a sudden you're catapulted into this.
Yeah. And the reason why I mentioned the 21 weeks is because that's quite significant, because legally at 24 weeks, even if your baby didn't survive, it could have been viable, and therefore you're allowed your maternity leave. So because my son was born at 21 weeks, I wasn't entitled to the maternity leave. During the pregnancy, my husband was made redundant. We were both working full time. He was made redundant, so the plan was that we were going to take a year off together, raising this wonderful baby, and then I was going to go back to work full time, and he was going to stay at home, being a stay-at-home dad. So we both ended up then not working for the initial so many weeks, which was kind of, we had each other. There was no pressure, I suppose, for him to go back to work. But I felt the need to go back to work. I felt that I should carry on and that I should continue on, because that's what I did. I went to work, and that's
find
what
a
I
focus.
should do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went back to work, I think 7 weeks after he was born. I remember it being quite stressful going back to work. And you know what the biggest thing was? It's funny, isn't it? The biggest thing was, I forgot to wear, because I was obviously visibly pregnant, and you don't just lose that weight, even though it's halfway through a pregnancy. You don't just go back to the shape you were. So I do remember shopping for new clothes to wear to work. That was one thing I remember trying to do. I spoke to my GP, and my GP was very good, because she suggested a phased reintroduction to work. So I think the first week I maybe did 2 mornings, and then I might have done a week of mornings, and then 3 mornings and 2 full days, and sort of gradually went back into it, which was very helpful.
Getting back in. Sorry, Pat. I'm actually picturing you even trying to choose an outfit, as you said, going into the shop, and just, I know for me, if I was to stand there, it would be just, well, there's all the racks. Now what do I do? That kind of nearly an automatic motion. I must get trousers. I must get a jacket. I must get a shirt. That kind of automatic process that that we go on, even just to do something simple like that.
Because although I'd been wearing maternity clothes then, obviously I didn't want to wear those, so they would have fitted, and the way some of them are sort of they would work quite well early on in the pregnancy and not too sort of big, but obviously I didn't want to wear those, but my normal clothes didn't fit, so that was a challenge, having to go and buy clothes to go to work in. So I went back to work. I really wasn't handling things very well at all. I would have been getting very upset a lot. I would have been breaking down, crying quite a bit. Everybody knew I was pregnant, obviously, because by 20 weeks it's quite obvious. Even if you hadn't been told, it would be fairly obvious by then. So it wasn't. If it would have been earlier, a miscarriage, and I've had miscarriages as well, it's maybe a bit easier because not everybody knows. I'm not saying miscarriages aren't painful, because I've been there and I've had a couple of those too, so they're just as bad. But I suppose there's an element of maybe keeping it to yourself, or having the option to do that. But obviously, the further on you are, you don't have that option then. And
as well as that, your husband would have been having people say to him, "Oh, you're going to become a dad," up to that point. So that must have been very difficult at that stage. He's watching you, and I've always, even my own husband, I kind of felt sorry for him, because they don't have the physicality that we have in the process of having children or giving birth or whatever. The mental, and they're there for us as well. So that must have been particularly difficult for him as well, to watching you and trying to balance the two.
And I think that's another thing as well with infant loss, whether it's miscarriage, stillbirth, whatever. I think people tend not to ask the father, "How are you?" It all tends to be very much focused about the woman, because they're actually physically going through it. And I don't think people tend to think quite so much about the male partner. That's another aspect. So I had been to my GP, and I'd said that I wasn't coping very well, and she had done a little questionnaire they have for postnatal depression, and she had said that yes, she thought I had postnatal depression, but she felt it was more in relation to the grief and the grieving process, rather than I'm not saying a normal postnatal depression, a postnatal depression where there's a live baby, should we say. And she didn't want to put me on medication because she felt that medication is going to prevent you from getting pregnant again. You also need to be on it for 2 to 3 months, so it's a sort of, well, not long term, but there's a certain period of time you have to take it for it to start working. And if you're on the medication, it prevents you from getting pregnant. So she felt it wasn't the right option for me, because she felt if I were able to get pregnant again, that it would relieve the symptoms of the postnatal depression. So it was a joint decision that I agreed with. So I was in work the one day. I was a manager in the company that I worked for, had a couple of people working for me, and I absolutely lost the plot with one of my guys, one of my team. And it was in front of everybody. It was an open plan office, and I was screaming and shouting at him. He didn't really do anything, but that's the stress, and
it was just that
problem.
moment,
Yeah,
something in
absolutely.
that moment.
Yeah. So when I'd calmed down enough to stop shouting, I decided it was probably best to go home. So I drove home. It was in the middle of the day. I remember it was a beautiful, would have been a winter's sort of afternoon, beautiful sunny day, really, really nice. And I was driving down the N11, doing 120 kilometres an hour. And I was coming up to Greystones. There's a lovely underpass, it's a fairly new road at the time in Greystones. And for that split second, I thought, if I, like in the movies when people do this with their car, I'll do it like that so you can see my hands. For that split second, I wanted to just drag the wheel and drive into the underpass, because I just wanted the pain to go away. I wanted it all to stop. That's a bad
And the
thing
thing
as
is, yeah, but that feeling, you are definitely not the only woman to have had that thought or that feeling going through that, the postnatal depression on that side of it. So many women have felt that emotion, and that at that point, if I do this, that's it.
Yeah.
But something stopped you and you made a call.
I did, yeah. I thought of my husband, who's also grieving, and my mum, who's grieving her husband still, and I suppose it was that second thought that stopped me, not the first thought. But it would have been quite easy for just to follow the first thought. Very, very easy. So I went home. I didn't tell my husband that I'd considered that on the way home. But I rang my manager to tell her what had happened in work, because obviously, they'd been extremely disrespectful to somebody who's in my team, which I felt very bad about. So I rang her to tell her what had happened, and I actually told her about how I felt driving home.
And that actually, as we were chatting the other day, the first person you rang was your boss, was your manager.
Yeah. She was a very easy person to talk to, always very supportive. Yeah, it's just easier to talk to somebody like that than maybe family. Don't know why.
And
it was.
But the thing is, I think when we know who we can talk to, and our family are there, and we know who we can.
Yeah.
But to ring your boss, she obviously has a certain way of working and a certain way of doing things, or telling you something. Yeah. So there was something that you knew in your head that, well, if I ring her, I know I'll get the A, B, C.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do.
Yeah.
Then you need to take that next step and move on to this. And sometimes I think we will ring someone because we are at that point. That is actually what we need to hear.
Yeah.
I need to know what to do next. And I know you're the person that's going to be able to tell me that.
Yeah, because she was very action orientated. I think that was the thing. And the outcome of that was that my company had a counsellor that they used, and a day later I had a mobile number. This person's expecting you to get in touch with them. They don't know anything. Get in touch with them, make an appointment. And that was it. So that's when I started getting counselling and getting help. But I think the biggest thing for me was that I realised that I needed help and I needed to speak to a counsellor, but I couldn't imagine having to start Googling whatever, looking up people and ringing them up and saying, oh, I need to come and speak to somebody. Are you available? And when are you available next? I absolutely couldn't have done that. There's just no way that would have been within my capabilities at that time. And
you
I
needed
suppose,
direction, and
yes,
that's what she gave you.
yes, yeah. Now, I actually wasn't expecting her to say, "Oh, we're going to give, we're going to provide counselling for you." That wasn't the expectation. That was the outcome. But I just wasn't in a capable frame of mind to start investigating that myself.
So when you started then with the counsellor from work, how did that change things? Not just for you, because to be able to get counselling is just brilliant, but for you and your husband, because he is also, carrying his grief as well.
Yeah.
So it had to be something that would work for both of you.
Yes. Well, I think I was signed off for a couple of weeks off work with stress. Anyway, obviously, if I was that bad to be shouting at somebody. But I think at the first meeting with the counsellor, the first session was just somebody that could tell me that my feelings were completely rational, as in the grief that I was feeling, and that what had happened was really terrible. I think somebody telling me that and just or agreeing with me that it's okay to feel that bad, because gosh, you've been something terrible what's happened to you, and the two things compounding each other. And I think just to acknowledge that my feelings would be fairly normal for somebody in that situation, I think that really, really helped.
Yeah.
So
to know you're not, and it literally is that thing, to know you're not going mad, that there is actually, there is actually a reason, and it can be worked through, and it can be worked, and even just to hear those words.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I carried on. I was probably having twice weekly or weekly sessions for quite a while, actually, with her. My husband went on to have counselling himself,
which is brilliant.
Yeah, which I was really, really pleased at. He didn't have as many sessions as me, but he did still have a few sessions, and that really, really helped. But our relationship got to a point where the one day we were talking, we were either going to separate or we were going to have a very strong marriage going forward. That's how bad things were from the grieving point of view, and just the whole stress of marriage.
But I would say a lot of couples, and I think absolutely what has to be admired with yourself and your husband was that you were actually able to say that to each other, because there are a lot of couples and they feel they can't say that to the other person, to their partner. And I think the fact that you two obviously communicate so openly meant you could say that, and that you could actually work through it together. And I think, I know myself, I think that's huge.
Yeah, it was a strange conversation, but we both actually felt the same. We felt like it would either be the making or breaking of us. This just the whole situation and the incidents that had happened, I suppose. But we're still married, so that's the good news.
Not only are you still married, but there's others, and they're in school actually at the moment, as we are chatting.
I was very fortunate, actually, because I was lucky enough to get pregnant quite shortly after. So my son was born at the beginning of December 2010, and my first daughter was born in February 2012, so 14 months later. So I was very lucky, really, to be in a position to get pregnant again quite quickly afterwards.
So for women now who are watching this, and maybe it's not even themselves, one of the things that we actually, even just before I ask you for the hints or tips, when we were chatting the other day, we were saying, that time you have a really good cry, and there are times when we cry, we don't want anybody coming near us. And there are times when we cry, when we really, really wish somebody could hear us. And part of it is, for anyone going through this, is to, if somebody comes to you, to actually let the person in.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And I know that was one of the questions you asked me at work. You'd said, had it been obvious that I was struggling? And I said, oh yeah, I was crying all the time. I mean, it was a daily occurrence, crying at work in front of people. So I mean, people knew I wasn't in a good place, for sure. It certainly wasn't something that I was hiding well. And I guess what I want people to to take away from this is that to ask for help. I mean, as I say, I didn't really know how. I couldn't have started looking for a counsellor and started doing that myself. In hindsight, I could have said to somebody else, I need help, but I'm not in a place to do that. Could you get me a counsellor? Could you ask around for me? I suppose there's that element to ask for that help. But the other side is, if you think somebody is struggling, to ask them, not just, are you okay? Because you're going to get the answer back, I'm grand. You know, that's just the way it is. To really ask, are you okay? Are you really okay?
Yeah, and that leads into, because you were at a talk.
It's
Was it
just
you
what
were
I was going to
speaking
say.
or you
That's
were
right.
listening
No, I was
to?
listening. It was about a year ago, and it was the clinical manager from Pieta House in Cork did a talk that I attended. Her name's Sylvia O'Driscoll Wong, and she would speak to everybody when they first get in touch with Pieta House, and she would assess them and then pass them on to their counsellor that they're going to have the regular sessions with. And she said, every person that she has met, nobody wants to kill themselves. They want the pain to go away. And this is what prompted me to speak out in the first place, because when she said that, it hit a nerve with me, because that's all I wanted. When I had those thoughts, I just wanted the pain to go away. I wanted it to stop. I didn't want to kill myself. I just wanted to stop feeling as bad as I felt. And that really struck a chord with me, because I thought, God, she's right. She's definitely right. That's it. You know, that's exactly it.
Because it's so consuming and you don't know what to do with the pain. We don't know how to manage the grief. We don't know how it's going to impact on everybody else. It's just just please take us out of it. Yeah.
Give me something to make it stop. And I don't necessarily mean drugs. I'm talking something. And what she actually said was that she gives them some hope. So she looks for something that some little bit of responsibility that they might have to give them some hope. So quite often it can be a pet, you know, something as simple as there's a dog at home. So, well, if you're living on your own, who's going to look after the dog? And that could be the hope. Oh God, I can't, because what about the dog? And little things like that. It could be something as simple as that. But she went on then to say that if you think somebody is in a bad place, that it's okay to ask them, are you suicidal? It's okay to be upfront and say that. And I would have thought that wouldn't have been the right thing to do. Because she said quite often, if people are desperate for help, they're not going to say, oh, I think I might be a bit suicidal. They're not going to say that. It isn't something someone's going to say, actually, things are really bad. If you ask them, there's more of a chance that they will say, I might be, or possibly.
Or I'm not that far yet, but I am feeling X, Y, Z.
Exactly. I'm feeling, things are very bad. You're more likely to get the response that could help save somebody that way. So that, I suppose that's part of the message as well, that it's okay to ask people, to be that direct and ask people, are you all right? Or if you think somebody is struggling, to possibly say, you know, have you sought help? Can I help you get help? Because perhaps that person can't get help themselves. Perhaps they're just not physically able, mentally able to go looking for that help themselves, because I wasn't.
And that's the thing, because when, you know, as we were saying, one of the things, you build that, when you're carrying such grief, you build that wall. Now, you don't realize it, but you have built that wall around you, because this is your grief. It's for, you know, we feel it. And when I say I'm talking about you as a couple. So the two of you are there. This is your grief. You're going to deal with it here. And you know, to step outside of that and say, sorry, can somebody help me? That doesn't even come into it, because, you know, you, as a couple, you just keep yourself together. You're a unit. That is the grief of your unit. And you don't want anybody else stepping into that unit, but yet you don't know how to step out and actually ask for that help.
That's right. Yeah. It's very, very hard to do that. I would have found it very hard to do that anyway.
Yeah. And I actually think most people do. And I think that's why we kind of need to rely on those outside of us to start tapping on that wall that we have built up. And as you say, that counsellor was saying, actually ask the person.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you feeling suicidal?
Yeah.
And the chances are they'll come back and say, well, no, I'm not that far yet, but I am feeling absolutely really down, really low, and I don't know where to go. And that can open just that in itself.
Yeah. It's just opening that door to start that conversation that actually perhaps I could do with talking to somebody, and not somebody, friends, family. It's a different experience talking to somebody who is very apart from you, because you can say anything to that person, and your counsellor, you can share anything with them, and that it's confidential, and that it's not going back anywhere, and that you're not going to be judged for anything you say.
That's actually
And
the
that's the
key thing. You're
difference.
not going to be judged.
Yep. I think that's the difference, because if you are talking to a friend or a family member, and there could still be somebody that's very good that you have close to you that you can talk to, but I suppose there's always an element of, oh, should I have said that to them, or I've shared too much with them. And with a counsellor, that you don't have that, because you can share anything.
You also had the added weight of being over here away from your family.
Yes. Yeah.
So you were carrying that too, because they were over in the UK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're over here.
Yeah, which is another element.
So what would you say? So your top tips is the wrong word, but your advice to anyone watching this who either is going through it or has somebody close to them maybe that they need to keep an eye on, what would you say? What would you say today to them?
I think if you're going through it, if you haven't spoken to anybody yet, be that a GP, perhaps you could go to your GP and ask for help from them as well, because that's another avenue. So there's a GP to start with. If you feel like me that you weren't able to start ringing up counsellors and saying, can I have an appointment? Have you got any availability? Get a friend to do that. If there's anybody there that can do it for you, because they could turn around and do all that work for you and say, right, this is somebody here, there's an appointment for you, get them to make an appointment for you, or something like that, perhaps. So I think that for the person that's going through it, if you're struggling and don't know what to do, there's always Pieta House and their helplines as well. That's another option, of course. And any charities that might be in your local area.
Yeah, and I've put this. I put up the links there for anybody, and there is Postnatal Depression Ireland, which is pnd.ie, or there is counsellingonline.ie. And I know the team there, now they have spoken here on the webcast previously, and I know any of the guys there would be able to steer you in the right direction or whatever.
Brilliant.
But absolutely, help is
the key thing.
There.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, actually, just as you said, even if you get someone else to make the phone call, the thing is, when somebody else is doing the call for you, they will actually see your situation from the outside, and they might even be better, if that's the right way, because they will be describing to whoever they're talking to what it is that they see as well in you. So, where the woman themselves might feel that I can't even find the words to express it or explain myself or whatever it is. Sometimes, yourself, an outside pair of eyes can see it.
Mm-hmm. But I think that when I did actually go to see my counsellor, they weren't told anything. I didn't tell them anything. So it was just making an appointment. And then in the first session, I was asked, just to start talking and tell me why you're here, really. And that's when I started, explaining the whole situation. And so that the counsellor didn't know anything beforehand.
I have found that, because I've gone to counselling for different things over the years. How funny, all since I've been married. I don't know. Don't know what that says about me, but and that's the great thing. What I found with the couple of counsellors that I would see, and they just say, "Okay, just start talking," and you come away going, "Well, what did they find out about me there?" And then you go back to the next session, and they kind of reveal how it, and you kind of go, "Oh my God, you got all of that out of me, of what I would have felt waffling, or just." Not even remembering what I said. And I think, and that's the great thing, because once you say it, you let it go.
That's what I was going to say. It's the act of talking about it, and rather than it just going round and round and round in your head when you're talking about it, it's almost like letting it go, isn't it? Starting to let it go, talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I know this has been so good to come on today, Fiona, and I do have your contact details here, so anybody can get in touch with you at fiona.walsh@imaginecoaching.ie. So you can email Fiona on that, or you will find her on LinkedIn at Fiona Walsh 1, and there's no E on the end of that Walsh, by the way. So it's just WALSH, because I had to double check myself a couple of times. And like that, if anybody is feeling that they really, really need to talk to someone, and I should have had the Pieta House info here on the link as well, but do get in touch with either Postnatal Depression Ireland or our online counsellingonline.ie, and do talk to somebody. Do not, please, hold on to this. And whatever feelings and emotions you are feeling, trust me, there are plenty of other women out there who have also felt exactly the same, and do not feel guilty about the emotions or the thoughts that you are having. Just ring someone and offload them, because there are professionals there to carry that and sort it and go through it and get you through it. And I think, you know, that's what makes counsellors such a unique tribe in, you know, to me, because they just get it. They know how to bring you back.
Mm-hmm.
So to your boss that you worked with at that time, I would like to say fair play to her.
Yeah, she's brilliant. I'm still in touch with her, not that regularly, but we are still in touch, and she's fantastic. She still is.
Yeah, well, her way worked. Fiona, thank you so much for coming on today. We do have a couple of comments. I'm just going to, I won't pop them on the screen, I'll just read, but Jane wants to give you a hug. I wish I could hug you, Fiona. Thank you so much for sharing such a personal story. You've no idea how many people that you will help. So that's what Jane said. And actually, it's two Janes, believe it or not. There's another Jane. She's saying, very courageous of you, Fiona. You are doing great. So, Fiona, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I can't believe I didn't burst into tears either with you, alongside you. But it has been such a pleasure chatting to you. And to everybody out there, please do go get help. And we will pop the links, including Pieta House, into the comments shortly after this broadcast. Thank you so much, everyone. And I shall see you all next week, please God.